Okay, welcome to another episode of filler episode, for lack of better terms. This is one of many channels that I have. This one is anime focused. I won't go through too much here, but there's the socials. So please check those out if you like the content. Definitely subscribe. Already have people asking me to do stuff without thumbs upping, subscribing, etc., etc. So I think we all know how social media, YouTube knows at this point works at this point. So please engage in those forms of support. But yeah, let's talk about Zom100 season 1. So while Zom100 starts off strong, I ended up disappointed in it for rushing to a conclusion it almost didn't earn. If modern media were a meal, zombies would be potatoes, rice, or beans, the equivalent to the carbs or filler of that meal. And while this may cause you to roll your eyes, it's no coincidence. The Walking Dead is still alive, undead, somewhere in between there, and has 15 different spin-offs, including some really jank video games. It's a compelling, non-political reason to drastically change society and highlight humanity and all its good and bad. But the smartest series look to zombies not as an enemy or an in-game, but as an obstacle. Or even if you've heard about Orange is the New Black or Steven Universe, started as something, but clearly was not that by the time you understood what was really going on, and Zom100 gets this. Zom100 is no zombie survival story, but in a brilliantly constructed way, a story about what we can do with our time as individuals. It's not just about Akira surviving, but also a critique on society, particularly Japanese society, and approaching your old life with a new mentality. And most impressively, this isn't just a surface glance or some sort of, he's depressed for one episode and then defeats the villain and never has to deal with it again situation. Credits to the mangaka and the animation studio for making this series absolutely gorgeous. It animates well. The creative choice to have zombie blood and, probably other fluids, I'd assume, be any color of the rainbow are great decisions. Why have a dark, drab, gross zombie apocalypse when you don't have to? This may also be reflected through the protagonist's worldview, so it's great visually and thematically. It almost looks like somebody's doing graffiti or tossing paint buckets all over the place. It's really nice, especially coming from somebody who just reviewed a very brown version of Hell, which taxed my computer for no real reason. But let's go back to what we're talking about. But I'm sure that also helps in terms of ratings as well. Instead of having blood and guts, you have colors, which is a clever way they used to have to get around ratings, And Batman, the animated series, the Joker can't just kill people, so instead he Joker gasses them, and that keeps the rating down. But when running, going back to the actual script, when running from zombies or confronting them, the anime turns into almost something you see in a fighting game, MOBA, or Splatoon. There's also an emphasis on uniqueness. Zombies aren't just one body type, and they're in different states of undress, as you can imagine would happen if an outbreak took everyone by surprise. We also see some, I think, a zombified shark. I don't know. We don't really get too much into zombified animals, but there's definitely like a... But it might not have been zombified. I can't remember it was like people inside the shark, but doesn't matter too much anyway. Another great element is the optimism of the main character. If you're watching along with Toonami, we recently had a character like this on Licorice Recoil, but we really didn't get a justification on why she was so cheerful. Was she maintaining her optimism by relying on drugs? Did she feel that bumming people out would inconvenience them, so she avoids it all at all costs? If we're to think these characters are human and to relate to them, we can't portray them as one note, as that just makes them unrealistic. Consider even the recent Fallout show on Amazon Prime. There are unnaturally happy people there, and there's a reason for it. Some characters are unnerved, but my point is we all know why Akira smiles without a second thought. And there actually may be thoughts behind that smile if you come down to it. And the reason why he's looking at a new lease on life in 2024 is a great one. His life sucked. Oftentimes I end up thinking about a subreddit, a boring dystopia, the subreddit of boring dystopia, where they point out how much life sucks for normal and poor people, and this is supposed to not only be normal, but to be accepted with no complaint. I'm not Japanese, but their work culture is known for how brutal it is and how much of your life it takes up. Partly because of their collectivist culture, but mostly because work culture globally is kind of fucked. You're expected to slave away the majority of your life for hopefully an adequate salary, then eventually retire to enjoy your elder years. But even retirement, especially if you're American, is in question nowadays. So rightfully, someone may ask, what is the point in me doing all that hard work? We only get a slice of that, but for the short period we've endured it, he's done it for years. To the point where he hasn't visited friends or family for like a period of, I think, 2 years or more. And as we find with Akira, he's worked very hard to the point he develops PTSD and is clearly mentally unhealthy. He doesn't have a life outside of work, and the zombies upend all of that. Well, I'm sure there are very few people could call zombies a welcome thing. Akira does. With a zombie apocalypse, he no longer has to go to work and decides to make a list of all the things he wants to do and has neglected. And so we get to the core of the show. It's very well done. While it would be easy, as many survival games boast, to make the premise survival, for Akira, there's an irony in that the zombies give him perspective and, most importantly, freedom. Why would you want to give your entire life away to a company that doesn't value you anyway? Good question. Unfortunately for Akira, his past has also had a certain resilience to it, for better and worse. He confesses his love to his colleague, who did a bit of sexual quid pro quo. I can't blame her in trying to survive. Who becomes zombified before him. This is a great example of what the show does. It's almost accidental renaissance, to bring up another subreddit. He does not look in fear or disgust upon her as she's zombified. He knows it's finally time to face his fears and confess, even if it's stupid and makes no sense and is dangerous to him, because he could be zombified as a result of it. He also reconnects with an old friend who also had issues in trying to be a proverbial square peg in a round hole that is the working world. Akira's boss appears, and he finds himself just as defeated as prior to the apocalypse. His new friend also suffers at his boss's sexist, manipulative hand, and as a watcher, you feel it greatly. This is another difference between Licorice Recoil and this show, where Licorice Recoil, we did get a tiny bit of justification after they finally told us what's going on, but here you kind of get it from the jump. Where the series loses me a bit is when Akira wears dreadlocks. Insofar, all of his desires, his Zom100 list, though they may have been silly or understandable, this one is just racist. And this isn't just a one-episode gag. He keeps the hairstyle into the season finale, but that's not all, however. The newest party member they get is, I think she's a German foreigner who calls them all samurai and refers to Japan as Nippon. I'm guessing she's doing the same thing we see Thor do in Marvel movies, speaking ye old Japanese, but it didn't really come off well, especially with the racist hairstyle Akira adopts. I could explain why using an African hairstyle is racist, but because I had someone already comment when I brought it up when I was live tweeting and say that he can wear whatever hairstyle he wants. Instead, I'll say that people who don't have African hair and do that hairstyle are hurting the health of their hair. Even if you don't think, even if you don't think there's anything morally wrong about that, you are hurting your hair. This also ties into a later point that I'll get into. Finally, we see the gang square up against, if we have the good guys, If the good guys are the Zom100, I guess you have the un-Zom100. They all die, so I'm not really going to think about it too much further in terms of naming them. As opposed to Akira and crew, these Cretans did not fit into society and are looking to take advantage of the fact that social order has toppled. One was living an unfulfilling life and he hated his wife. Another couldn't keep his job. Wasn't really clear, He's a Japanese person who's expected to know French as somebody who is in an environment where I am probably expected to know Spanish, even though I've let it lapse. I can kind of relate to that. But anyway, a lady who was anal retentive, and finally Eren from Attack on Titan. No, that last one is not a joke. If you're watching the dub, it's even the same voice actor. While the protags defeat the bad guys, it's a bit less impactful because some of the things I mentioned earlier, the un-Zom100 are doing whatever they want regardless of the impact to others, because much like looters during a hurricane, who's going to stop them? The leader even makes a point that unlike Akira's 100 things he wants to do, Eren makes a list of 100 things to do before becoming zombified. This shows the ideological divide between the two groups. Akira, of course, is hopeful and looking forward to the days to come, while Eren's list is nihilistic and assumes everyone would become a zombie. Eren makes a point to say he'd race Akira and try to see who would complete their list first, but as I've already said, he dies. Not too big of a loss there. Another complication is clearly the un-Zom100 crew is supposed to be seen as selfish, self-serving, and, quote-unquote evil, but like I just went over, one of the last things we see Akira do is take on a racist hairstyle, so as the audience we're supposed to see the divide between their ideology, but honestly, what makes Akira so different from some non-black person who thinks it would be okay to use the N-word after the apocalypse? Even if he wanted to radically change his hair, he could dye it. He got the dreads from a hairstylist. I'm sure that could be like a little subplot in episode, or a part of an episode where they find some hair dye or style him up in some way. Additionally, we also have Kensho exposing himself to a female miner as humor. And again, this would not bother me as much if it truly was, for humor and we didn't have like the two other instances of weird stuff going on. So these things are not problematic individually, but as a whole, they detract from the message saying the anime is trying to give, and make me like the series less overall. While I look forward to more from the series, the casual racism is a turn-off for this black man. So the grade that Zom100 would have gotten would have been an A, if not for especially like the dreadlocks and the weirdness around that. But as it stands, Zom100 stands in B tier. It has been a while. You probably, if you are new, you definitely haven't seen this, but if you are an older watcher of mine, you probably haven't seen this in a while either. I won't go over the entire thing because I know YouTube is very big on video length, but let's just go over the B tier at least. So the B tier is basically, it's absolutely fine. There's some things keeping it being from A tier, which is absolutely, anybody can watch this and they can probably get something from it. It's good, not just good for anime, but it's good. So yeah, the B tier is just, it just doesn't have that special something to move up to A tier, and definitely still good shows, but maybe has like a couple problems, or just, it's just not an A tier. Like, I would not be able to recommend B tier stuff to anybody, but let's just go over B tier since it has been a while. So B tier, we have Ghost in the Shell, 2045, the Netflix one, Attack on Titan prior to the basement reveal, Mob 100, Gundam Origin. I am not going to remember the name of that. If you're a Gundam fan, I'm sure you will. Food Wars, I probably should bring that down. Let's just leave it at B because most people know to avoid the final season. Agretsuko, really good, but the last couple seasons you get characters doing weird stuff, and it feels like it ended, I think it was the third season where Retsuko, she ended up telling off the rich boyfriend. I thought that was a good end. Inuyasha B, it's all right. It's not great. I mean, but you know, why fix what isn't broken? Yasuke, someone who's in the headlines, gets a B. Dota, Dragon's Blood. It's okay. I mean, it. Weirdly enough, like, I think it's either the second or the third season. Yeah, it's probably the third season, because the second season has like Lena. The third season like becomes like you're worshiping Invoker, you know, glazing Invoker, as the kids would say. Promised Neverland, that ending, that second season was not great, but the first season definitely up there. So the first season was so good, it kept the second season from bringing the grade down too much. And finally, Zom100 rounds out the B tier. Again, B tier stuff that is great, but may have some problems or just does not reach that threshold to be recommendable to anyone. But anyway, as always, thanks for tuning in, folks. We have the socials here. You are on One Punch, you are not on One Punch Combo. You are on Filler Episode, where we review anime. We might do other things, but that depends on time and viewership, especially since we've got people already asking me stuff in the comment section without subscribing or thumbs upping. So please do those things I just mentioned. Thanks for tuning in.